Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here, breaking down my top 10 running back units in college football entering the 2025 season. Dalton, running back, as we know, is maybe the most physically demanding position in football, honestly. It's why you see so many great running backs. Their careers are often capped around 30 years old. So you need more than one. So this is really about who has the deepest group and who has the best group of running backs. Not just one superstar. You need a deep number 2, number 3, number 4, even number 5 running back on this list. And, we broke down my quarterback rooms already, but usually you only have one quarterback the entire year, hopefully. Running backs, so you need at least 2 or 3 probably to get through the season.
2, 3, 4. Some teams even go through more than that depending on injuries and wear and tear and things like that. But I think you mentioned it. It's not all about, for most teams, unless you have a guy like an Ashton Jeanty for Boise State last year, it's about what you can get out of the group. And I know it's not a factor in these rankings, but even what you can get out of your quarterback in the run game as well is a big factor. It's a big factor in some of these guys' success that we're going to talk about. So it's certainly to have depth both at the NFL level and at the college level. It's being more and more emphasized that if you don't have one of those superstar backs, have as many threats as possible, even get some on the field at the same time and let it rip. But these are a lot of talented players we're going to talk about in these units. Some guys even that we didn't even get to mention in your top 10 running backs, right? So yeah. I think it's a lot of fun to see when these teams, and when they bring these waves of backs and they get the run games going, it can really be a dangerous threat to opposing defenses.
Absolutely. So to remind you guys, like Dalton just said, we actually broke down already my top 10 running backs in college football entering next year. So if you want to see who the best individual players are at running back, we already broke that down for you guys here on this channel. But now it's about which teams have the best rooms of running backs going into the 2025 season. I want to remind you guys, making this list, used all PFF stats and, of course, tape watching as well to make this list. All those PFF stats are available to you guys with a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com. So you can make your own list, and also every stat on every player in college football and the NFL is available to you guys with the PFF Plus subscription. So go to subscribe.pff.com today to get access to that. My honorable mention backfield here, Dawn, is the LSU Tigers, who have my number 1 quarterback room in the country, and now they have an honorable mention running back unit in college football as well. I thought Caden Durham was fantastic in his debut season. He was a former 4-star recruit out of high school, and he was second among Power 4 true freshmen last year with 749 rushing yards, only behind Isaac Brown from Louisville, who in my opinion is one of the 2 best running backs in college football entering next year. Also, Caden Durham led all true freshman running backs in America with 261 receiving yards last year as well. And behind him, the Tigers brought in 2 of the 10 best running back recruits in the nation in Harlem Berry and JT Lindsey. And Harlem Berry was the number 1 running back coming out of high school and a 5-star recruit coming out of high school as well. So LSU's got a great sophomore running back in Caden Durham and maybe a future superstar in true freshman Harlem Berry.
Yeah, no, I think Durham here is the headliner. And you talk about a team that, look, Garrett Nussmeier took the second most dropbacks in the country last year. They need to balance this thing out on offense, especially with 4 new starters on the offensive line. So Durham, look, we started to see him in that South Carolina game. I thought that was really a game where he turned the tide of it, right? Remember South Carolina dominating early, and then LSU found the run game a little bit with Durham, but super talented, breaks through contact, 28 missed tackles forced on just over 140 carries. I think not only is he an excellent player, I think a super important player for LSU to get the balance in this team going. Love Garrett Nussmeier, top 5 quarterback in the country, but they asked him to do too much last year. If they can balance this thing out and not have him leading the nation in dropbacks, then you really have a dangerous offense with LSU. But Durham's going to be the key to that, especially behind an offensive line that we don't know what we're getting out of them yet.
Yeah, absolutely. They lost, I believe, 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen from last year, including a top 5 pick in Will Campbell at left tackle. So it's a brand new offensive line for LSU next year. Garrett Nussmeier needs as much help as possible, and I think Caden Durham and also the group of running backs behind him are going to be very vital, like Dalton said, to their success next year. But they come in as an honorable mention backfield. At number 10 for me is Baylor, actually. Baylor has a really good running back unit going into next year, and it starts with Bryson Washington, who as a redshirt freshman had 1,035 rushing yards last year and was 13th among all Power 4 running backs with an 87.9 rushing grade. He also was 12th in the Power 4 with 4.1 yards after contact per attempt. So Bryson Washington had an excellent redshirt freshman year and is one of the most underrated running backs, I think, in college football right now. Behind him is Dawson Pendergrass, who also had a strong second year at Baylor with an 80.5 rushing grade, and he ran for nearly 700 yards last year as well. And Baylor brought in a 4-star running back, true freshman, in Michael Turner this year as well. But really, the combination of Bryson Washington and Dawson Pendergrass, I thought was enough to get in the top 10.
Absolutely, I think. And this is one of those teams I talk about where you've got a deep running back room and the rushing threat with quarterback Sawyer Robertson. And you look at the size of these guys. Washington's 200 pounds. Pendergrass is 220. Robertson at quarterback is 220. You got a serious problem in the Big 12 this year if you're trying to defend the run against Baylor, plus Robertson can bring it with the arm. But you mentioned it, to have two backs with at least an 80 rushing grade last year and have them both coming back, and then a rushing threat in Robertson as well at quarterback, Baylor's going to be a problem for a lot of teams in the Big 12 from the backfield.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just a huge fan. Bryson Washington, like I said before, is an extremely underrated player. Did not make my top 10 running backs list, but he was certainly one I considered, and he'd probably be a top 15, I'd say, running back in college football right now, and only as a redshirt freshman last year, too, right? It was really only his first year playing a lot of college football, and he was a star for the Baylor Bears last year. So number 10 is Baylor. At number 9 is Minnesota, who did have one of my top 10 running backs in college football in Darius Taylor, who's my number 7 running back in the country. He's a do-it-all back for the Golden Gophers. 79.9 receiving grade over the last 2 years, leads all running backs in the Power 4, and he has over 1,300 rushing yards after contact over the last 2 years, second among returning Power 4 running backs as well. Behind him is a transfer from Marshall in A.J. Turner, who Dalton led the nation last year with 8.3 yards per carry. So A.J. Turner, excellent year at Marshall. Now will be the backup running back behind Darius Taylor at Minnesota. And A.J. Turner had an 87.9 PFF grade that was 15th among all running backs in the country with at least 250 snaps. So Darius Taylor, top 10 running back in the country, and you have a guy who led the nation in yards per carry last year. Yeah, it's good enough to be the top 10.
This is one that I was arguing with you about when you were making this list. I said, I think I need you to get Minnesota on this list. And
You're
Taylor,
right, yeah.
we know Taylor's really good. He's that classic, big, bruising, Big Ten back, right? But that's why I like A.J. Turner coming in from Marshall as the complement, because he brings the speed, the explosiveness. You mentioned 8.3 yards per carry, 16 explosive runs on just over 100 carries last year. This is somebody who complements Taylor really well, adds an element of speed to Minnesota's backfield that they didn't have last year. I think it's going to be a really dynamic duo in the Big Ten that we're going to see. You've got that thunder and lightning combo of Taylor and Turner. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch in Minnesota.
Absolutely. So I think there's probably 2 schools in my top 10 so far, don't a lot of people are surprised by seeing on this list in Baylor and Minnesota. A school that definitely won't be surprised seeing on this list, though, is the Georgia Bulldogs, who seem like every year have a top 10 backfield in college football. Nate Frazier will be the lead back for Georgia this year. He had a lot of hype last year as the number 2 running back coming out of high school in the 2024 class, and had a very, very strong freshman year. Led the Bulldogs with 671 rushing yards and an 84.2 rushing grade in only his true freshman season. So he's a rising star in college football. They also picked up Josh McCray from Illinois in the transfer portal. He was the 7th most valuable Big Ten running back last year, according to our wins above average metric. Cash Jones is also back for his redshirt senior year. He's one of the best receiving backs in college football. He was 4th among all running backs in the country last year with an 81.7 receiving grade, and then also is Georgia, so of course they have plenty of talented former high school recruits in that backfield as well. Roderick Robinson, redshirt sophomore, redshirt freshman Chauncey Bowens, redshirt freshman Dwight Phillips, and true freshman Bo Walker. All of them were former 4-star recruits in their high school classes. So Georgia's backfield is always going to be 7 or 8 deep, but they still have some really intriguing guys at the top too.
For sure, and I think at the very top, this Georgia by the end of this year could be even higher on this list depending on the breakout that we get from Frazier. Because last year with Trevor Etienne still around, you had Branson Robinson. We weren't really sure that Nate Frazier was emerging as the starter. It was kind of part of a deeper rotation, and this is still a deep rotation, but Frazier's the guy. McCray really came on the second half of last year, and you mentioned it, really like Cash Jones as the third down receiving back and get flexible, even lining up out wide a little bit. I think Gunnar Stockton really needs to rely on Jones a lot in the passing game this year, but you've got at least 3 deep there, and like you mentioned, the pipeline of talent at running back for Georgia just never ends.
Absolutely, yeah. Georgia checks in at number 8 on this list because of who they brought back from last year, and also brought in Josh McCray. Number 7 on this list, another SEC school, for big reason why is a transfer in the Oklahoma Sooners, who brought in Jaden Knott, who in my opinion is one of maybe the second best transfer running back that we had this past season. Jaden Knott only had less than 400 rushing yards last year in his true junior year, because he had kind of a nagging ankle injury, and also California's offensive line was a disaster last year. But he was dominant in his first 2 years of college football. Across 2022 and 2023, Jaden Knott was 6th in the Power 4 in broken tackles with 108 broken tackles, and he was also 6th in the Power 4 with 517 receiving yards as well. So Jaden Knott is probably at least a top 15 running back in the country. He's my honorable mention running back on my top 10 running backs list. And then also, Oklahoma did bring back their leading rusher from last year in Javonte Barnes. He had 3.4 rushing yards after contact last year, 10th in the SEC. And Taylor Tatum is entering his sophomore year at Oklahoma as well. He was the number 1 running back coming out of high school in the 2024 class as well. So you have Jaden Knott, who's easily a top 15 running back in the country, your leading rusher from last year, and Javonte Barnes, and Taylor Tatum, who, like I said before, was the number 1 running back coming out of high school a couple years ago, too. So Oklahoma is number 7 on this list.
Yeah, I mean, they probably wouldn't have been on this list unless Ott had just transferred in the spring transfer portal window. But I'll tell you what, I think one of the things with Oklahoma, we're going to wonder about the offensive line and the blocking, but you know what's going to make Ott and these other backs' life a lot easier is the fact that John Mateer is the quarterback now, too, and he's one of the most dynamic rushers we have at quarterback, in the country. So I think that is what Oklahoma's ideal season looks like. They're going to run the football a lot between Mateer, Ott, Barnes, maybe Tatum, like you mentioned. So I think that's where it starts, and then they get the vertical passing game going and maybe get into a better passing game than they had last year, because it was just a supporting cast, right? We've talked about the struggles of Jackson Arnold, but this team this year, they've made a statement with Mateer, with Ott coming in as transfers. They want to run the football, and you mentioned it, they got a deep group to do so.
Absolutely, yeah. If I included quarterbacks in this and just kind of a rushing attack ranking, Oklahoma will be
might be
there.
Top 3.
Yeah,
I mean, they might be in line. If you were to get 2023 Jaden Ott, well, they'd be near the very top. That's for sure.
There's probably a couple schools that have really good dual threat quarterbacas that'd be a little higher.
A&M's a fun one.
A&M
we'll
might
get
be
there.
One. Yeah,
that's where. But yeah, when you factor in the quarterback with it, then you have a real situation with Oklahoma, because Mateer is certainly. We'll see if the passing holds up against SEC competition, but he's certainly one of the most dynamic runners in the country.
Easily.
Also.
Yeah, absolutely. He's maybe the best runner we have a quarterback in college football right now. He's an unbelievable runner, transferring over to Oklahoma. So if he was included, they'd be a little higher on this ranking. But since it's just running back units, Oklahoma's still top 10 here at number 7. At number 6, though, is Oregon, who I mentioned before. Jaden Knott is the second best transfer running back this year. That's because Oregon got the best one in Mekhi Hughes, coming in from Tulane, who is, I believe for me, a top 5 running back in the country going into next year. Over the last 2 years, in his first 2 years of college football, 1,982 rushing yards after contact. The only 2 running backs in America who have more over the last 2 years. Ashton Ginty, Omarion Hampton. First-round picks in this past NFL draft. Those are the only 2 running backs in the nation who had more rushing yards after contact than Mekhi Hughes over the last 2 years. And keep in mind, they were sophomores and juniors doing that. Mekhi Hughes is a true freshman, true sophomore at Tulane. He also has 2,776 total rushing yards over the last 2 years, the most by any running back returning to college football by 476 yards. Nearly 500 rushing yards more over the last 2 years than any other running back returning in college football. Behind Mekhi Hughes, you have Noah Whittington, who's entering his 3rd year now as one of Oregon's backup running backs. And he had a really impressive 87.1 rushing grade and 1,499 rushing yards across 3 years with the Ducks so far. So Mekhi Hughes, top 5 running back in the country, and a really good number 2 running back as well in Noah Whittington, who's been there for a while now in Oregon.
Yeah, for as high-flying as this Oregon offense always is, Will Stein's still going to want to run the football, especially with a younger quarterback now and Dante Moore coming in to start. But Mekhi Hughes is reliable as it gets. I've told you before, he reminds me a lot of Thomas Jones from back in the day. Very physical, always falling forward with those yards after contact, like you mentioned, and can handle the workload. Got a huge workload at Tulane the last 2 years, but he's ready for Big Ten competition. I have no doubt that he's going to be really good this year. And then Whittington, that's as good a number 2 back as you get in the country right now. So Oregon's got a great pair of them, and they're going to run the football a lot to support Dante Moore.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Noah Whittington, man. He's been at Oregon for now it's going to be his 4th year. He's kind of a backup running back his whole career at Oregon, but he's still been a very effective player. Like I said, I believe an 88 rushing grade in his career so far, nearly 1,500 yards across his 3 years at Oregon. Number 5, though, getting into the top 5 of this list is, like the team we mentioned before, the Texas A&M Aggies. Check in here at number 5. Le'Veon Moss, yes, his season ended after only 9 games last year, but he was incredibly difficult to tackle before he went down with that knee injury. 4.4 rushing yards after contact per attempt, 6th among all running backs in the Power 4 last year. His backup, Amari Daniels, is back for his redshirt senior year. He had an 80.2 rushing grade last year with over 600 rushing yards in 2024. Reuben Owens only had 16 carries this past year due to a LaFranc injury, but he was the number 3 running back coming out in the 2023 class, and he ran for 385 yards as a true freshman with another 100 yards as a receiver as well. And then E.J. Smith was also a backup for Texas A&M last year, but he was Stanford's leading rusher in 2023, and he was the son of all-time great Emmitt Smith. And in 2023, he was 15th among all running backs in the Power 4 with 242 receiving yards. So Le'Veon Moss, I think, is probably a top 15 running back in America. But behind him, Dalton, are 4 really, really intriguing players.
I mean, you got an extremely deep room, especially as long as Moss is healthy. You know, you wonder if A&M might have had a better shot or might have made the playoff had Moss not gotten hurt against South Carolina. But this is a dynamic running football team. And then you add Marcel Reed in there, a full season of Marcel Reed at quarterback, and even another guy who's not in this, he's not in this group because he's a wide receiver, but Kevin Concepcion, too, is somebody who can really run the football like he is one of these guys.
Bussey, too.
Terry Bussey as well. I mean, Texas A&M has just got athletes left and right in the run game, but it starts with an extremely deep running back room, especially with Moss and Daniels at the very top of it. Expect Mike Elko and this team to run the football a whole lot with this stable of guys that they have, including all these backs, including the quarterback, including a couple of receivers. They've got them coming from everywhere, and if Moss is healthy especially, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this team on the ground behind a veteran offensive line, too.
Absolutely, yeah. So, now you mentioned it, I think Texas A&M rushing attack-wise is probably number 1 in college football, just because of what they have in that running back room. Marcel Reed's one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the country, and like Dalton mentioned.
If you added wide receivers in here, then A&M might be really number 1 on this list. Yes. I mean, Concepcion, even this times at NC State where he lined up in the backfield, and it looked natural to me. I mean, you could move him back there full-time. They just don't need him to with a group this deep already.
He led NC State as a true freshman in rushing yards and receiving yards that year. And then Terry Bussey, like I mentioned before, was listed as an athlete coming out of high school because nobody knew where he could play because he was just such a great athlete. He was a wide receiver for Texas A&M last year, but he also led all true freshmen, I believe, receivers in the country in rushing yards last year.
Just go to a triple option down there. Just start crazy. Just run an A&M's offense like an academy school. They could probably do it.
They really could, honestly. So A&M's rushing attack next year is loaded, but they are coming in at my number 5 running back room in college football. At number 4 is the Louisville Cardinals. And even though Louisville lost a couple running backs to the NFL in 2023 in Jawar Jordan and Isaac Garendo, they immediately replaced them with 2 star freshmen in Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. You see on the screen right there. Isaac Brown was not even a top 40 running back recruit coming out of high school, but he is now my number 2 returning running back in college football entering the 2025 season. He ran for 1,168 yards as a true freshman, the most of any returning running back in the Power 4. He also had 7.2 yards per carry, led all Power 4 running backs returning or not. So he led the Power 4 in yards per carry and the most rushing yards among returning Power 4 running backs as well. Like I said before, my number 2 running back in college football entering 2025. Duke Watson didn't quite have the volume that Isaac Brown had, but he was incredibly efficient, man. Former 4-star recruit, 8.7 yards per carry, led all running backs in the country with at least 50 attempts, and a 90.6 PFF grade was the best grade for any true freshman running back in the Power 4 with at least 100 snaps as well. So again, Duke Watson, not as much volume as Isaac Brown, but he still was incredibly efficient. And Isaac Brown, Dalton, is already my number 2 running back in the country after only 1 year.
Well, you've got 2 explosive backs, and we're going to talk plenty about Miller Moss throughout the summer, but the engine of this offense is really going to be these 2 backs, and you've got both of them over a 20% explosive run rate. When you start getting up in that 20% territory for backs in explosive run rate, you've got super explosive players who can make big plays happen, and Watson especially, 30 missed tackles forced on just 69 carries. That's
crazy.
Ridiculous. That's an insane number. If you were to keep that up with a higher volume at that rate, you'd be talking about maybe 2 of your top 10 backs next year. But this pair at Louisville, it's a dangerous ground game, and then you're going to get Jeff Brom and Miller Moss in the passing game going, of course, like he's got in the last couple of years with Jack Plummer and with Tyler Shuck last year, who was 5th in passing grade. But this run game is going to be a serious problem for most teams in the ACC. We'll see eventually when they get to playing Clemson, and you know what? They dominated Clemson on the ground last year. This could be the biggest threat in the ACC is these 2 backs, right? When you talk about, okay, what could really win Louisville, the ACC, it starts with this run game and then Miller Moss actually complementing it, even though he's the big name transferring in at quarterback.
And the fact that they both were true freshmen last year, and Isaac Brown averaged over 7 yards per carry, and Duke Watson averaged over 8 yards per carry. Just insane true freshman years from these 2 running backs, easily why they're a top 5 running back unit for me going into the 2025 season. At number 3, Dalton, is the only school in the top 4 that does not have a top 10 running back for me on my list, but still deserves to be a spot here because how deep the room is. That is the Texas Longhorns checking in here at number 3. Quintravion Wisner is back for his junior year. He was 3rd among all SEC running backs in 2024 with 1,060 rushing yards and 695 yards after contact. But Quintravion Wisner was not even supposed to be the starting running back for Texas last year because C.J. Baxter had a really good freshman year in 2023 with a 74.6 grade, but he missed all of the 2024 season after tearing his LCL and PCL before the season. So C.J. Baxter, who was the number 1 running back coming out of high school in the 2023 class, was the starting running back for Texas when Jonathan Brooks went down with an injury. He unfortunately also suffered a pretty serious knee injury in the summer, I believe, of last year. Missed all of 2024. Now he's back for his redshirt sophomore year going into this year. Going to probably bounce back in a big way next year. So Trey Wisner and C.J. Baxter, and also 3 former 4-star running backs as well in true sophomore Jarrett Gibson, redshirt freshman Christian Clark, and true freshman James Simon as well. So Trey Wisner, C.J. Baxter, and then a pretty good committee behind them as well. But those 2 at the top, Dalton, Trey Wisner, C.J. Baxter, I believe is one of the best duos in the country.
Yeah, I think considering everything else Texas had, right, one of the top 3 defenses in the country, a great offensive line, you know, the receivers, Matthew Golden, everything else. We probably never properly gave Wisner enough credit for the job that he did in filling in as the starter when Baxter got hurt before the season even started, right? And you look at the way he turned it on down the stretch. An 85 rushing grade for the season is fantastic. 186 rushing yards against Texas A&M in that win, 110 against Clemson in the playoff game on just 15 carries. You look at the explosiveness and the power that he brought. He was kind of the thunder and lightning, to Jaden Blue's lightning kind of back there in the backfield with the 4.2 speed, right? But Wisner was really the engine to come in as a guy who didn't get a ton of carries the first few games, and then they just kind of made the starter because they were trying to find it. Wisner did a fantastic job last year, and then to have a guy with C.J. Baxter's talent coming back to play next to him, Texas another one. They're just this running back factory at this point. We're just getting them every single year. There's 2 more coming this year. They had Jaden Blue last year and Bijan and Jonathan Brooks before that. Just so many lately. Steve Sarkisian just keeps cycling them through. But Wisner and Baxter, what a great duo this could be as long as that Texas offensive line replaces some veterans as well that got lost in the draft.
Roschon Johnson was recently too. He's a great player at Texas. Yeah, Texas just puts out running backs, seems like, every single year. And C.J. Baxter is a guy that I think could really explode next year and become one of the top running backs in the draft because he was really encouraging as a true freshman. Like I said before, he's the number 1 running back coming out of high school. He missed all of his second year with an injury, but now he's back for next year. And yeah, he and Trey Wisner together is one of the best duos in the country. But then checking at number 3, and I believe it's pretty solid number 3, Dawn. I don't think this should be any higher or lower. Number 2 and number 1 are very difficult for me. They really are 1A, 1B. And I'm right when this list came out, a lot of people were upset that this team at number 2 is not number 1. That is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish show, checking in at number 2 on this list. Notre Dame does not have 2 top 10 running backs in the country like the number 1 team does on this list. But they might have the deepest room in college football. You see right there, Jeremiah Love, that guy on the screen, is the best running back in college football, bar none. I don't even think it's much of an argument right now. Jeremiah Love is the best running back in America going into next year. The second most valuable running back in college football last year, according to our wins above average metric. And he was second in the Power 4 with a 38% forced missed tackle rate. I know we just saw 2 running backs in the first round in Ashton Jeanty and Amari Hampton. I think we're going to get another one in 2026. I believe Jeremiah Love will be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. Behind him is a really, really good number 2 running back in Jadarian Price, who honestly is probably a top 20-ish running back in college football going into next year. He led the Power 4 with 4.5 yards after contact per attempt last year. They also brought back Aeneas Williams, who was second among all true freshman running backs with 172 receiving yards last year. And then you also have a redshirt freshman in Keidron Young, who was the number 9 running back coming out in the high school class in 2024, and a true freshman in Nolan James Jr., who was number 15 running back coming out in the 2025 class. So you have the best running back in America in Jeremiah Love. You have one of the best number 2 running backs in America in Jadarian Price, and then a really good true sophomore in Aeneas Williams, and then a couple guys behind them too were really highly rated recruits. So Notre Dame was almost number 1 for me, Dalton, but not quite.
It's funny because it almost feels like the biggest obstacle to Jeremiah Love winning a Heisman is that Notre Dame has so much depth behind him, right? That, last year only got 162 carries. It's going to be hard to win a Heisman on that, but you've got Price behind him who can spell Love, obviously with the explosiveness and the speed that he has. You want to keep that fresh at all times, and then I really do like Williams as a receiving complement in this backfield. I think he could get used even more as that third guy, or maybe even moving around the formation some. Similar player, I think, to Cash Jones at Georgia that we mentioned before. Yeah, he's a receiving back, but greatly complements the first 2 backs that you have here. So, look, you got the number 1 back in the country. You got a really deep room. Better be a pretty darn good unit at number 1 to be ahead of that. And I'm sure you're going to – this 1 and 2, I think, is where you're going to get a lot of argument maybe in the comments and from the fans here about, hey, you know what, maybe they have Love. They have the number 1 guy. They might even be a little bit deeper, but, well, your number 1 team's got a good argument too.
It's a really good argument. Yeah, it's literally when I was making this list, I had Notre Dame at number 1.
Now I'm thinking about you making the list, and I go, well, yeah, of course.
Me as a lifelong fan of the school, no, it's not the reason why they're number 1 here. But at number 1 for me is the Penn State Nittany Lions coming in at number 1 because of those 2 players you see right there, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. They are 2 of my top 6 running backs in college football entering next year. So anytime you have 2 of the top 6 running backs in the nation, it's very hard for me not to put you as my number 1 running back unit in college football going into next year. Among returning Power 4 running backs over the last 2 years, Nick Singleton has the most receiving yards with nearly 700 and is the second most valuable one according to PFF's wins above average metric. Katron Allen is second among returning Power 4 running backs with a 92.5 rushing grade over the last 2 years and exactly 2,000 rushing yards over the last 2 years as well. The Lightning is Nick Singleton in that backfield. The Thunder is Katron Allen in that backfield. And also, they're number 1 here because of those 2 players. But Penn State does have 3 former 4-star recruits at running back as well in redshirt freshman Corey Smith, redshirt freshman Quentin Martin, and true freshman Jabri Wallace-Coleman too. So those 3 are exciting prospects for the future of Penn State, but because they're number 1, Dalton, is because they have 2 of the 6 best running backs in America, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen.
Yeah, it's hard to argue it because, they're the one team in the country where you have 2 backs that could start just about anywhere, right? Yeah. And both of them over 1,100 yards last year. 2 different types of backs, like you mentioned, that Andy Kotelnicki can do whatever he wants. If he wants to get downhill, run some power, run some gap scheme, he's going to go to Katron. If he wants to run zone and get some one cut and find an explosive run, you're going to get Nick Singleton. Singleton also a very good receiver. He's really the receiving back. Between the 2 of them, a little more versatile. But I think 2 backs that are both obviously really talented, but they complement each other so well as well, right? You can use either one in a lot of different situations, any which way they want to go about it. Between the tackles, outside, in the receiving game with Singleton. Kotelnicki's got options, and I'll tell you what, he's lucky that both of them came back along with Drew Aller and most of the other guys that did, especially on defense. So Penn State, look, their ground game, they're loaded. You got these 2 guys. You got an offensive line that I think is going to be even better than it was last year, and Kotelnicki in year 2 of calling plays. Look out.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick Singleton right now on the consensus board is number 32 overall prospect. So we might get 2 running backs in the first round again next year in Jeremiah Love and Nick Singleton. But because Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, Singleton's my number 3 running back in the country, Katron Allen's my number 6 running back in the country. Because Penn State was the only school to have 2 of the top 10 running backs for me in college football, they were the number 1 team for me on this list. So, Dawn, anything you disagree with on this list? Anyone should be higher or lower? Any school you think was left out of this list that should be on this one?
No, I just think about like some of your other schools that had top 10 backs. I think about, I'll tell you what, it's a quarterback driven thing too. But Jonah Coleman and Damon Williams out there at Washington in that backfield, I'm not sure what they have behind Coleman necessarily. Not that you need a whole lot.
They have Adam Muhammad, who's a true freshman last year, like 193 yards, which is solid. But that's why they didn't make it. Jonah Coleman's excellent. He's my number 4 running back in the country, but there's not much behind him.
Not much behind him, and it's going to be based a lot on the quarterback too with Damon Williams. That's going to be fun to watch. But no, I think a solid top 10 here. I love that we got Minnesota, like I said, at 9. I'm in on that with the pair that they have. Oklahoma's going to be, if Oklahoma figures it out, especially on the offensive line, and they really get the schemes that they want to do in the run game, especially with Mateer, because it looked like they started to figure that out sort of with Jackson Arnold last year. Remember the Alabama game where it was really just ran all over Alabama? That's one of the best front sevens in the country. Mateer's an even better athlete than Arnold is. Oklahoma's the one to me that the ground game could be a whole lot of fun, even though they've got a gauntlet of an SEC schedule.
Absolutely. Just kind of recap what my top 10 was for you guys. My honorable mention running back unit was LSU, number 10 Baylor, number 9 Minnesota, number 8 Georgia, number 7 Oklahoma, number 6 Oregon, number 5 Texas A&M, number 4 Louisville, number 3 Texas, number 2 Notre Dame, and number 1 Penn State. I believe the one school, Dalton, that a lot of people would be shocked by that's not on this list, because they usually, like Georgia, are always going to be in this list no matter what they have, is Alabama. They were my next team out on this list. They did lose running back in Justice Haynes going over to Michigan now, who was kind of their lead running back last year. Jam Miller is back for his senior year, though. He's a pretty solid running back. Richard Young was a top 5 running back coming off high school as well. Excited to see what he can do in his redshirt sophomore year. They brought in Dre Washington from Louisiana, who had nearly 500 yards last year at Louisiana. And, of course, it's Alabama. They have a lot of former great recruits as well. Kevin Riley, redshirt freshman, number 3 running back coming out of high school, and a Kylan Deere, who's a true freshman, number 2 running back coming out of high school. So Alabama legitimately has like 5 or 6 deep at running back, but just they didn't have a true number 1 right now. It's more of a committee backfield for Alabama, but still a great argument for me to be in the top 10.
Well, they're going to be leaning on that group too with Jalen Milroe gone, and you're not assuming it's Ty Simpson. You're not going to have the rushing threat again at quarterback. So now it becomes even more important the depth of that running back room and what Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb can get out of them on the ground. They're going to be more of a passing team. It's how DeBoer and Grubb. I'm putting them together now. It's how they always operate is the passing game first, but they still want to complement it with the run game. We saw that with Dylan Johnson when they were at Washington. Couldn't quite get it done in the backfield last year. Milroe was really their best rushing threat. Now that has to change with a less mobile quarterback in there.
Absolutely. All right, that wraps up my top 10 running back units in college football entering the 2025 season. Next week, we'll be doing my top 10 receiving cores in college football entering 2025. So make sure you guys subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those content coming out very, very soon. For producer Eli back there, for Dalton Wassman, I'm Max Chadwick. We'll see you guys on Monday with my top 10 receiving cores in college football entering the 2025 season.